this project, we're going to need the following supplies. First of all, we have the yarn, of course, and depending on what size skirt you're doing, that's how much yarn you're going to need. A scissors, 2 sizes of circular needles. I have here a 4 and a 4.5. So depending on what yarn you're using, that's the needles that you're going to need. We need one that's a half a size bigger than the other. And then we're going to need a few sewing supplies. So first of all, a piece of elastic that's big enough to go around the waist of the person you're making the skirt for. You should try to get one that's a color that's more similar to what you're using, but this is the one that I had right now. Then a needle, regular sewing needle, some thread, and a bunch of pins. So let's get started. I'm going to be using a 4-weight yarn, so my first size is going to be a 4mm needle, and I'm going to be making a size for a 4-year-old. So let's get the start over here. Okay, we're going to start with a long tail cast on. Take out however much you'll need for the size you're making. I always prefer to take out a bit more so that I shouldn't run short. And we're going to start casting on. It doesn't matter what amount, if it's odd numbers or even numbers, it doesn't matter, as long as you have the right size that you need. The best way to tell the size is to make a swatch and then measure it according to the measurements that you need, or around the waistline. Since we're going to be knitting this skirt from top down, so we're starting with the waistline, so that's the width that we're going to need at the beginning. Once we've got our stitches casted on, now we're going to join in the round. And the most important thing before we start joining in the round is to make sure that all the stitches are facing the same direction, so they're not twisted. So just go around all the stitches and make sure that they are all facing inward. Like that. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to start knitting in the round. So pull up from the side over here, and we're going to do a plain stockinette stitch. No ribbing, no knit one, purl one, just regular stockinette stitch. And since we're going in the round, we don't even need to purl back. It's all just regular knit stitch. The first row is always a bit tricky and tight and might get a little hard to get through, but from the second row on, it should get easier. Here I'm reaching the end of the first row. I finished the first row, and now just continue knitting in the round. So we're going to do a double amount for the band. The band is going to be 8 rows wide, so I'm going to do 16 rows because we're going to fold it over and add the elastic to make a nice waistband. So I'll meet you back when I have 16 rows done. Here I've gotten 16 rows done for the waistband. And now we're going to put this aside for a minute and work on the elastic. So grab your needle and a little bit of thread. There we go. Again, if you could get a color that's the same as the elastic and similar to your project, That's great, but it doesn't really matter if not, because it's going to be inside and you're not going to see it at all. If you have a sewing machine, you could do this part on the sewing machine. It takes exactly 5 seconds to do. Or you could do it by hand, and I'll show you how. What we're going to do now is we're going to close up this elastic so that it should be a circle, like that. So grab the needle, just place one end a little bit over the other, and just start sewing. Just do a little bit back and forth. Oops. Okay, let me just close it up over here. Okay, so now we have the waistband nice and closed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fold over the waistband that we knit over here, like that. We're going to pick up from the cast on row, and like this we're going to close it, and at the same time we're going to be adding the elastic inside, and that's why we need the pins to keep it in place while we're closing it. Make sure that you are on the last stitch of the round. You can tell by where the tail is. This is the last stitch over here. You can see that this one is a bit lower, so that was the first one on the row. So that's this one. And I'm on the last stitch over here, so we know that we're at the beginning. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a few pins and attach the elastic around the waistband so that it shouldn't go out, and like this it'll be inside the waistband while we close it up. Just gonna take a few. Now, to make it easier, you should attach it as close as possible to the needle, because we're going to be folding up on this side, so like this it's already nice and snug over here. So let's place one over here, and I prefer to do it onto the side, and like this it won't interfere when we're folding it up. Just be careful not to pinch your fingers. Let me put another one over here. This is just to keep it in place while we're closing it up, so it shouldn't come out. I think another one over here. And one more over here should do it. I'm gonna put one more right here so that when we start it should be nice and closed. There we go. Okay, so now we got the elastic secured and we can start closing up the waistband. So first we're going to find the first stitch on the first row over here. So like we said before, here's the tail, this is the last one, so the first one is over here, and we're going to pick up, first the first stitch over here, put the needle inside of it, and now we're going to put the needle inside that first stitch over there. Is he? There we go. The first one can be a bit tricky to find since it's at the end, but there we go. Inside over here. And now we're going to knit, wrap the yarn around, pull this one off carefully so so that the yarn comes through, and then pull the yarn through that stitch that we picked up on the regular needle. There we go. There we did our first stitch to close it up. So now the next one, we go into here, we find the next stitch over here, so it's this one. Here's where we went in before, so now it's over here, into there, wrap around, carefully pull it through. What I like to do is, while I pull it through, is to make it very tight here on this finger, and like this it pulls through more easier. Over there, and pull through this one. There we go. We're starting to see how it's coming out. Next, over here. Here's the next one over. Side. And pull through. Look how nice and neat it's coming out. This waistband over here with the elastic nice and snug inside. Look at that. So just continue on this way all around the whole waistband. It takes a little time because it's a little tricky going through both the stitch and the one on the cast on row, but it's worth the time and worth the effort because the result comes out great. It is important to take note, just to make sure as you're going along, that the elastic stays on the same side all around and it shouldn't get twisted or something like that. Here, you see mine almost got twisted over here. I think I'm gonna add another pin over here to keep it in place. You could use also safety pins. That works just as well, or stitch markers that close. Really doesn't matter what, as long as you just keep the elastic in its place. So I'll see you when I finish the whole circle around. And here the waistband is done. Look how nice and scrunched up it became, and the elastic is snugly inside. Look at that need to join over here all around. There we go. Okay, so now the waistband is done, and now we continue on to the body of the skirt. So I'm going to be switching to the bigger needles. So this one was 4 millimeters. I'm going to switch now to 4.5 millimeters. So I'm just going to start knitting as normal with the bigger needle until it all comes off of these ones. Now a little trick that I could show you when knitting it around and you're changing needles to make it a bit easier and less awkward to hold around is take the right needle and pull out as much as you can, like that, and then it'll be hanging here and it won't bother so much while we're knitting from this needle. So now let me pick up here and starting to knit again, regular knit stitch all around. Okay, here we've done that first row. So now everything is over on the 4.5mm needles. So these we can put away. And now we're going to continue knitting in the round for altogether 6 rows. So this one was the first one. So now we're going to continue another 5 rows in regular knit stitch. I probably should have done this sooner, but better late than never. An easy way that you can tell where you're holding when it comes to the row, if you're at the beginning or at the end of the row, is you could use a stitch marker. Any kind. I like to use these kinds. And so let me just find my first row over here, my first stitch, which is over here. Here's the tail, so it's the one right after. And let me just follow along. Yeah, this is exactly why you should put the stitch marker right at the beginning. Here we go. Found it. Just gonna stick it somewhere here on the row just so I could tell that this is the first stitch of the row. Okay? Like this, it's easier to tell. Okay, so once we've done 6 rows in regular knit stitch, now we're going to do 3 rows of purl stitch. So instead of knitting all around, we're going to purl all around, continuing in the round as always. 3 purl rows. Once we're done 2 rows of purl stitch, now we're going to go back and repeat the 6 rows of knit stitch, and basically that's what our pattern is going to be. So 6 rows of knit, 2 rows of purl, and so on and so forth until we have the length that we need for the skirt. So just continue doing this pattern, 6 rows knit, 2 rows purl, and then we'll meet again for the end. Okay, so once you've reached the length that you want, you can see how this pattern comes out so nice and really adds a lot to the skirt. So now I'm on the last section of 6 knit rows, and then I'm going to do the 2 purl rows, and then we're going to cast off. So let's go ahead and do that. We should finish off on 2 purl rows. Once you finish these last 2 purl rows, now we're going to start casting off. And again, I've reached this first stitch over here, so I know that I'm at the beginning of a row. So now we can begin. And we're going to cast off with knit, not in purl, but in knit. So knit 1, knit another one, and now we're going to pull this first one over this one like that. Okay, there we casted off the first stitch, and it's very important to try to keep it loose, not too loose but not tight, and just continue, knit, pull over, and cast off. Here, see, we already casted off a few. So just continue doing that all around until we've casted off all the stitches. After I cast off the last stitch, I'm going to go again into the first stitch over there. As you can see, there's a little gap between the beginning and the end. So I'm going to go again into that first stitch over here. Pretend it's just another stitch to cast off. Knit it and pull the last loop over it. Just like that. There we go, and now it closed it off and made it much neater. Now just cut off the tail. Pull it through the last loop to close it. And that's it. Now we're just going to take off the stitch marker and with a darning needle I'm going to sew in the ends. And our skirt is done. Look how sweet that came out. I love how the design looks and the texture, it's just amazing.